Good afternoon. Thanks for joining promptly, everyone that's on the call already. My name's Dan Simpson. I'm a Senior Training Officer from the Courts and Tribunals Digital Services or Digital Service Programs team. And welcome to today's webinar. Thanks for joining promptly. Also joining with me today from the DSP are Guy Roberts and Simon Morrow, who will be monitoring and sharing content via the chat function as the webinar commences. This is first of two demonstration webinars to assist your readiness for the release of Registry Committals applications on the online services portal next Monday, the 28th of July. This will directly replace the existing Registry Committal application that this pilot group has had access to via the Legal Practitioners portal over the past 12 months or so. Each of these webinars will be recorded and available for a limited time to allow you to refer to them during the first few weeks after go live. Your attendance in this webinar is consent to be included in these recordings. Before we dive into the content, I would like to just take a moment to acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the traditional custodians of the lands, seas and waterways. Each of us are joining this meeting from today and pay my respects to elders both past and present. I myself am joining from Yagara and Turrbal land today. Just a little bit about the session. We have 45 minutes scheduled. Hopefully that should be plenty of time to cover the content we intend to today. Questions are welcome throughout the presentation. I would encourage you to post your questions in the chat, which will be monitored throughout the session. Additional or unanswered questions that you have can be raised in the dedicated question time at the end of the session. Initially, your camera has been turned off and your microphone is muted. This will hopefully help with connectivity and minimize any distractions. These will be turned back on during question time at the end of the session. Finally, I'd like to mention that today's webinar will be delivered using a test environment. Hence, you'll not see any real data or cases during the demonstration. Quick look at the agenda, what we'll be covering today. We'll start shortly. I'll share the screen with my colleague, Guy Roberts, who will be explaining why the OSP is being deployed and what will happen to the Legal Practitioners portal during this implementation. Then I'll take the reins back and I'll define the learning objectives for the session. We'll review the Registry Committal workflow to confirm what the focus of today's session is all about, and you'll see some slight tweaks in the workflow in comparison to what you're used to with the LPP. After that, I'll then start the demonstration. I'll show you how to launch and register onto the online services portal, which is the new platform that will be hosting the digital registry committal applications and replacing the Legal Practitioners portal that you may already be familiar with. Once in the OSP, I'll take you through the steps required to create and manage registry committal applications, and you'll get to see how similar it is to the LPP for those that are already familiar with that. And then finally, we'll open the floor, as I promised, to any questions, and we'll share links to the Registry Committal page on the court's website, where you'll find all the training resources that you'll be able to refer to when you start using the platform from next week onwards. But without further ado, I'll hand over to Guy to just explain a little bit about why the OSP.
Thank you, Dan. So due to ongoing performance issues and technical limitations within the Legal Practitioner portal, the online processing of registry committal applications is being transferred to a more stable and modern platform, which is the online services portal. This will be occurring from Monday, 28th of July, so this coming Monday. This will see the process being handled by Dynamics 365, which is a more robust and consistent platform in order to handle the applications as they're submitted. And it also provides a more user-friendly experience for prosecutors and practitioners alike. risk. As these portals have never been designed to be an overarching case management system and rather a method of online lodgement, there won't be any data migration from the LPP through to the new online services portal platform. No new applications will be able to be submitted from the LPP, so the Legal Prac portal, from this coming Monday, the 28th of July. However, the platform will remain available for a 4-week period for any applications that are in progress to be finalised. Following this, the Legal Practitioners portal will be decommissioned on Friday, the 22nd of August, at the end of that 4-week period, where all online registry committal applications will be processed through the online services portal. Cool. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Guy. Appreciate that. So as promised, let's just quickly define the learning objectives for today's session. So at the end of this session, hopefully you'll know how to connect to the online service portal, how to create and edit a registry committal application, how to submit a registry committal application, and then we'll also look at withdrawing and deleting registry committal applications if the need arises, and then wrap up with reference to those resources that are available to assist you beyond today's session. Remembering that we are recording this session and this will be available for a short period via the court's website as well. Now, as you may be familiar with already, if you are using the Legal Practitioners portal, the Registry Committal online application aims to streamline the application and approval process by enabling collaboration between defence and prosecution digitally pre-lodgement. The workflow follows the legal requirement for lodging registry committals and includes integrated data sources such as quick, rules-driven alerts and notifications, trackable process and automated distribution of outcomes and documents. Only legal practitioners, law firms, or prosecuting agency staff and registry staff are permitted to use the registry committal process. Self-represented litigants are not legally able to commit a matter via the registry committal. They must continue to use the court committal process to commit an indictable offence to a higher court. Now, from the workflow that I'm sharing on screen at the moment, you may have noticed a slight change at step 3. Previously, with the Legal Practitioners portal, the prosecution review was returned back to the defence teams, so the likes of yourself, who would then resubmit to the registry. Now, with the online services portal version, the prosecution review is forwarded directly to the registry, and an automated email notification is sent to the defence team informing them of the progress of that application. So, as promised, I'm now going to switch to a demonstration. So I'll bring on screen what the online services portal will look like when you first click on the link to launch the site. And it will prompt you, as with this version here, this is a test environment that we're using for the purposes of the demonstration, as I mentioned already. So we won't see any real live cases via this demonstration. But on the left-hand side, we have this little login button. As we click login, it will take you to a screen here asking you to authenticate your identification. For those prosecution staff and members of the sort of Queensland Justice community, they'll be able to use single sign-on with their government accounts. For the likes of yourselves, you will need to go through an online digital authentication process via the login with digital ID. And this will allow you the options of using either My ID, formerly MyGov, I think, or whatever it was called, and QDI. So hopefully you're familiar with both of these processes. We did include in the invitation email that got sent out links to the corresponding learning materials that are available for each of those authentication processes. For the purpose of the demonstration today, I'm going to continue with My ID. So I'll click on My ID and I will select My ID via the choice of options that become available to me here. And I will then enter the email address of the or the email address that I have set up with my authentication. So for the purposes of this example, I will be just using this little test email here. As you click Get Code, it will then display a code which will you then authenticate via your mobile device. So that will be actioned. Fantastic. Let me just try that again. Where am I going? I'm going to go.
Apologies, team. The testing accounts we have for MyID, they do take down occasionally, but we do have a workaround to get in if that happens again here.
Yeah, let's just try that again. Okay, enter the email, get code, verify the code on my mobile device. That will then confirm the authentication and get me into the online services portal. Now, the first time you're entering the online services portal, it will require you to then register. So you will need to select either of the two options here, whether you're a law firm representative or self-represented litigant. Now, I did mention that the registry committal is not available to self-represented litigants, but there are other services available on the online services portal that self-represented litigants can use, hence the reason you've got the second option there. But of course, for the purposes of this demonstration, we'll be logging in as a law firm / legal representative. Now, based on your digital identity that has been authenticated via whichever option you chose, be it MyID or QDI, some of your name and your email address will have populated initially from that login. Now, bearing in mind that you may not be using your work or your law firm's email address with that authentication, you may find that a personal email address will appear in this field. Now, in that instance, I would suggest just changing that to your work email so that as and when any notifications get generated by the system and get sent to your profile, you will obviously receive that in your work address. So just make that adjustment accordingly. We'll also just throw in a contact telephone number as well. But they are all of your personal details that will be shared with the system, simply your name, email, and phone number there. Then we have the choice as to whether you're joining as a legal practitioner who is then setting up and registering the law firm. We're not going to go through that step today. There is additional material available via the court's website that will provide you with instructions on doing that. So you will require an administrator within your location to set that up, and then they will then grant access to all other staff members that are joining that legal organisation via the online service portal. As I've said, resources available via the court's website with further instructions on that. I'm going to be joining as a legal practitioner and wish to join an existing law firm because my law firm admin has set that up. And at that point, I get the option to choose which law firm I'm joining. I'm going to choose an organisation which we've set up called Legal Law today. And then once I've chosen my law firm, it will ask me for a request code. Now, your system administrator, so whoever's the administrator for your law firm, will have set a code. It may well be purely a numerical code or an alphanumeric code. They can decide on the complexity of that code when they register your organisation via the online service portal. For the purposes of this demo, it's just a simple 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the final option before we acknowledge all the terms and conditions is providing my Queensland Law Society ID. Now, I chose the option up the top here to join as a legal practitioner. If I had chosen I am a paralegal, legal assistant, that Queensland Law Society ID field would not be required. Now, one change that the online service portal has provided compared to the legal practitioners portal is the ability for paralegals and legal assistants to submit an application on behalf of a legal practitioner within your organisation. So I'll put in my Queensland Law Society ID code there. We would, of course, then review the terms and conditions for the site, as well as the collection notice information. Having reviewed and acknowledged all of that, I select the fact that I have acknowledged that, and on ticking this box here, you'll notice that the register button will then become enabled. And at that point, I will click register. And what that will do is that will submit my request to the administrator of your organisation. Now, they will receive an email notification. So you see here, it is pending approval. So I am logged on another screen as the administrator for my law firm. And that is Lily Brown here for legal law. And Lily goes into a section titled Manage Users, and that is where Lily will then see this request that has come through from that individual. Now, I'm logged in as Angelique Jones, so Lily will approve my request. And then all I need to do, bearing in mind that this is likely to take over a period of time rather than instantly, as we're demonstrating here today, I will then simply need to log out and log back in again. So I'll briefly log out. Because I'm incognito, I'm just going to have to go and do that again. And then when I log back in, I will need to go through my authentication again, which I will do briefly. But this time, rather than having to go through the registration process as I've just demonstrated, it will log me directly into the site. So that registration will be first time entry on the online service portal only. Fantastic. Things never go the way you want them to when you need them to. Apologies for this, everybody. Let me just briefly do this again. These are the issues with using test accounts. It'll be a lot more seamless in the live production environment. The issues we encounter, because I'm logging in as multiple IDs, there is sort of a caching problem with the authentication process, and that's what's causing the confusion. There we go. So now I'm logged in as Angelique Jones. As I mentioned, I'm associated with the law firm that I've joined, which is Legal Law. And now I have access to the services that are available to me via the online services portal, which include, for the purposes of today's webinar, the registry committal. So let's dive straight in. Now, in this test environment, of course, we've been playing with this account. So there are lots of existing applications currently underway at various different stages. And you'll see the status here indicates the stage they're at, whether it's draft, whether it's prosecution review with registry staff for processing, or whether it's being verified by the registry staff. And the fifth and final stage is the completed stage once that application has been fully approved and updated. So I'm going to start by demonstrating how we create a new application. So let's click Start New Application. And this is where you'll really see the similarities with the legal practitioner portal for those who have used that platform before. It even has a very similar visual with these coloured steps that we'll progress through over the course of the next couple of minutes. So we start by specifying who the legal practitioner is. Now, because I'm logged in as a legal practitioner, it automatically has my details in there. If I had logged in as a paralegal or a legal assistant, it would then appear with a secondary additional field underneath, which would then allow me to choose a legal practitioner within my organisation. So with that legal practitioner identified, I'll hit continue, and then we're on to step 2. And you can see step 2 here is where we're then locating the cases that are associated against our defendant. And we can search for these a couple of ways. If we know the case files, we can select case file and enter the number in here directly. Alternatively, as I will demonstrate right now, we can search by the defendant's details. Now, these search fields, I'm going to demonstrate using a wildcard. So the little asterisk is a wildcard, which means that any other characters after those characters I've entered will be matched in the search that I'm completing. So the defendant's first name is actually a double, or is 2 names. It's a Richard Mark Sisson. So if we just searched for Richard Sisson, so I'll actually remove that that asterisk there, that wildcard, you'll find that we won't find a match. So I would recommend probably using these wildcards quite extensively. The court location is another required field in this search. So you'll notice these tiny little red asterisks indicating fields that are mandatory. So we need to provide defendant's given name, defendant's last name, and court location before running the search. If I run the search in this instance, notice how there's no results because it is looking for Richard Mark as the full name. Hence, if I do use that wildcard, the asterisk, it will then find a successful match. So there we go. Richard's got a few charges against them. All right. So I'm just going to select the first one from the list. I can add multiples if need be. And you'll see that they then turn green and appear selected. As I scroll towards the bottom of the form, it then, before I continue on to the next step, even allows me to potentially remove one of those cases if I've added too many by mistake. So I'll stick with just the one in this instance. I'll hit continue, moves us on to the third step. Third step being, what are our committal options? What are we committing to? So we've got 2 charges on this case, charge 1, charge 2. From the drop down, again, very similar to what you will have been familiar with in the Legal Practitioners Portal, we have the choice of commit, amend, substitute, withdraw. I will end up just committing, but let me just demonstrate what happens when we select some of the other options, because they again are slightly different to what you were familiar with in the Legal Practitioners Portal, particularly the amend option. So when you select amend, you'll see here, it'll ask you, okay, what do you need to amend? Is it the offence location, date, charge, etc.? I'll keep this simple. I'll just say location. Once you select the field that you need to amend, you then have a corresponding field below that displays and allows you to provide that information. So if I choose offence date as well, again, another field will then display. So that's how you can provide the amendment details against that particular charge. I might just leave that as is. And what we'll do for the last one is commit. I will also highlight the substitute option, where if you are substituting one charge for another, you will need to provide the bench charge sheet. So it then provides you with the ability to then upload that PDF doc file into the form before you continue on. So I'm just going to commit with this one. So we've amended one charge and committed on the other. At any point you can save. That will save the application to your main dashboard, which was the screen we saw at the beginning that listed all of the applications, and it will sit there in draft, and we can continue on with that application at a later date if we require. I'm going to hit continue to move on to the fourth and final step, which is when we're providing all of the remaining application details. So committal details, custody, evidence, plea, etc. Now, many of these fields are dynamic fields, which means based on the answer that you select, it may display additional fields because of the information you've provided to that first question. So I'm just going to select no. I'm not going to read each of these, and I'm sure you're familiar with the information that's required of you in these registry committal applications. In this instance, we're going to be requesting this go to the district court. Based on that, it then provides me with the choice of which district court. So we've come from Brisbane Magistrate, so we will go to Brisbane District. Is the defendant in custody? If we were to select yes, no further information is needed to be provided. If the defendant is not in custody, then that will then, as you can see there, as I mentioned, due to the dynamic nature of that question, it will provide other questions that then need to be responded to. All of these you'll find will be mandatory, hence have a little red asterisk next to them. Similarly, the evidence question, has the defendant been given copies of the written statements? Yes. Well, that provides a follow-up question. No. Another follow-up question, slightly different phrasing to that question. Plea, is the defendant's plea guilty, not guilty, or no plea? Select the appropriate answer for the instance. And then we have the corresponding acknowledgements. So defendant consents to proceed, defendant acknowledges the functions of the clerks of the court, etc., etc. We select each of those. I'm intentionally going to leave this third one blank because I just want to demonstrate something in just a second. Remember, all of these fields are mandatory. So if I do accidentally miss one, what will happen as a result of that? And then finally, which prosecuting agency is going to be required for the prosecution review. In this example, we will choose the police prosecution and Brisbane Police Prosecution. If you wanted to specify the specific name of a prosecutor to make it a little easier on their end when they receive that notification, you can do so, but you'll notice it doesn't have a red asterisk, and therefore it's not mandatory. And then finally, our legal practitioner acknowledgement that we will select at the bottom here. So having completed that entire form, I will then hit submit for application. Now remember, I intentionally left one of the mandatory fields blank. It therefore will throw this sort of error message in asking you to check your answers. And it makes it a little easier for you because it is a long form, and the field that I've missed out is actually off the bottom of the screen at the moment. But this is an active link. So the defendant's consent to committal, that must be acknowledged. So when I click on that, it actually takes me to that point in the form. And you'll notice now that that actual form or the wording of that section has turned red to make it even clearer for you to select. So I'll select that. I'll try and submit again. This time we should have success. It will eventually come up confirming that that application has been successfully submitted, and a message will appear at the top of the screen. If it's taking longer than maybe 5 or 6 seconds to process, this message here then does display, so alerting you to the fact that it is still functioning and processing in the background. I know that was a major issue and concern that many people had in the legal practitioners portal. And as Guy said, that's the reason for this migration to the online service portal, which is far more powerful and more stable. So we get this confirmation that the application has been successfully submitted. The application number that's associated with this is 1043. And if I click this button here to return back to the dashboard, we will see that 1043 record is now sitting at the top, and it's moved to the prosecution review status. So that was the first thing I wanted to demonstrate, how to create a new application and submit that application. What about editing an existing application? Well, I'm going to move down to, and of course, we can only edit applications that are in the draft status. I'll talk about some of the other options that are available to applications that have gone beyond draft in just a second. I'm going to pick this record 1041. This was one that I submitted initially to the prosecution team. They have reviewed it and have returned it back to me with an action that is required. So I will have received an email notification of that, informing me that it has been returned from prosecution. So that email would direct me to my dashboard here. I will then open up that record. So this 1041 record that's in draft, I'll click view, and what I'll see at the top is a message that will have been provided by the prosecution team as they were returning that back to draft status. So the wording here would obviously indicate what perhaps is missing or whatever. Now, the rest of the form is actually locked down in read-only view at the moment until I click the Edit Application button. And then it'll effectively look as it was when I was drafting this just a moment ago. So we have step one here. Okay, we've got an error here because this was initially created by, I was obviously logged in with a different account, but this is a perfect scenario because perhaps a legal practitioner has left the organisation and you're taking over responsibility of their caseloads. So I'll demonstrate via this error message, because that person no longer has an account within the system, I can change it to a different practitioner. So I can change it to myself or a colleague, whichever is appropriate. So let's go with myself in this instance. I'll continue on. All of the other fields will all be pre-populated because this is a record that has been created and submitted in the past but has been returned back to us. So we've got the case in there. If I go directly to the charges, we could then make the necessary amendments that were required of us as by that return message. And then once we've done all of that, we can, of course, resubmit. There we go, that's resubmitted. So 1041 has been successfully resubmitted. If I return back to the dashboard now, we'll see that 1041 is now with prosecution review. They will have received an email notification informing them of that, and they will then continue to process and action that accordingly. Now, we've created, we've edited. What about what type of withdrawal functionality do we have available to us? You'll notice that beside each of these records, there is a view button, which of course will open up that record and allow you to view the information associated in it. And even when you've opened it up, you have a withdraw application option available to you as well. Now, the system will allow you to withdraw an application that is currently at prosecution review, which is step 2 of that 5-step workflow that we saw a little bit earlier. This little information button here reinforces what those 5 steps are. prosecution, registry, verify and complete. We have the ability, if I click withdraw application, it will allow me to withdraw anything that's with prosecution review. So I'll withdraw that one. That was 1042, I think, wasn't it? Let me just refresh the screen there. Maybe it wasn't. I can't remember what number it was. Maybe it was 1040.
1040, that one did.
There we go. Yeah. 1040, which is now returned back to draft. Now, the other option I could have done was actually chosen the drop-down arrow here and gone withdraw, and that would come up with the same message. So if you're absolutely sure it's that particular record and you don't need to open it to verify and clarify the information within it, then you can do it via that little drop-down. So prosecution review, that's fine. Anything that's the verify or registry process, you'll find that it will have that button to withdraw, but it then alerts you to the fact that that's gone beyond a stage where you can actually withdraw. If you need to withdraw that, you'll need to contact the registry team within the court themselves to action that or make any necessary amendments. Now, the final thing I want to demonstrate, and then we'll start to sort of bring the session to an end and open the floor to any final questions, is deleting applications. Now, we can only delete applications that are currently in draft status. So if I go to the little drop-down arrow that we were looking at just a second ago, against this record that is currently in draft, you'll see that rather than withdraw, it will have delete. So I can delete that record entirely if I so desire. And the same as we had with withdraw, if I were to open that record in draft, then you'll notice the delete draft button is available in there as well. And if I delete that, it will delete that from the system. So that record, that 1040, is now no longer available within the online services portal. So they were all the steps that we wanted to cover during today's session or today's webinar. So let me just return back to my presentation. I mentioned a number of times in the initial introduction that there are additional resources available to you to refer to via the court's website, including when we have the recording available, the recording of this webinar. There are user guides, there will eventually be some quick reference guides, and there's also resources on the online services portal and how you register onto that platform as well. Now, moving forward, this pilot group, so those court locations that were already using the Legal Practitioners Portal, Brisbane, Cairns and Rockhampton, they are the locations that were deploying the online services portal version of Registry Committal 2 first. And apologies for that, I've just realised that date shows the 14th. That actually goes live on the 28th of July, next Monday. And then gradually over the course of the next 12 months, all other courts across Queensland will be migrated across to the online services portal. So it's going to be a staggered approach over the next 12 months. Now at this point, I will start to enable your cameras and microphones. In the meantime, if you have any questions, please do pop them in the chat. Don't think we've had any questions come through as yet, but we'll give you the opportunity to share. Guy is sharing some links to the court's website that we mentioned. This does formally bring us to the end of the session. Feel free to drop off if you don't have any questions or are not interested in listening to any questions perhaps that are shared by others. Thank you for your time today, and look out for a recording of the session available via the court's website in due course.
Thanks, Helen. So what if we have 10 times fraud? Do we list each charge individually? Yes, so each of the different charges along that case will show there. It pulls directly from the court case management system. So how those charges are created in Quick, that's how they'll appear through into the online services portal. That's right. So if there's only the committal application is only relating to those two, we can just add those two cases across and select that commit option there, Helen. Perfect. Thanks. Yeah, so to start with, it is to replace the original pilot for the LPP, so Brisbane, Rocky and Cairns. However, over the rest of the financial year, you'll receive more information as we transition across looking to go to all magistrates courts by 30 June 2026. Awesome. Thanks, Helen, and thanks for your questions.
Thanks, Helen. Appreciate it. I might just stop the recording there, Guy.
Yeah, perfect.